Hey, 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 it's Dead and Lovely, okay?
This is us, the Dead and Lovely, here to talk to you.
And best intro ever.
Yeah, for sure.
Welcome,
That
listeners.
can't be beat.
Welcome, listeners, to Dead and Lovely, your new favorite horror movie review podcast. Here with your good buddies, Uncle Ben, and who is that? Who's that West Coast man I got here in the other line of the Skype call here?
It's me, brother, Hollywood Steven Spratley. Oh, yeah.
How's things been out there on that West Coast for you this week there, Steve?
Pretty great. Had a fun day today. My wife and I kind of like to spoil our dog because she's 8 years old, and we thought, we adopted her at 8. She had one family that whole time, so she's it's almost harder on a dog to be given up from one family at the age of 8 than to be passed around. So yeah, she was real timid when we first got her, so we've always kind of spoiled her. So today we went to a dog-friendly restaurant here in LA, which there are a ton.
Is it called First World Cafe?
It is, in fact. Actually, this is so first world. It's like 2 doors down from UCB in Los Angeles, the Improv Theater, which is about as wide as you can get. Anyway, the place actually is so awesome. For $2, they will bring out a cup of chicken for your dog.
Oh.
Yeah, it was surprising how much it was because our dog is very small. She actually only ate a little bit of it. And then we went to the Silver Lake Dog Park, which is really fun. There's just a bunch of dogs running around being cute, having fun together. So
that sounds like a pretty good time to be around.
Yeah, we had a good day. How about yourself, Ben?
I've been good, man. I've been good. We've been enjoying ourselves a good long Memorial Day weekend here in the Tennessee, so we've had ourselves a good long, just sort of lazy weekend. We've kind of been putting around in the house a little bit and stuff, but tonight we went out for some sushi sandwiches with some friends.
Yum.
It was great. We had ourselves a good time. We went out intending to go and see Colossal as well, that newer movie with Anne Hathaway.
Yeah,
we meant to see it, but then dinner ran over, so we didn't catch it. So we just hung out with our friends, which is great. Have you watched any good movies lately?
As I told you before we started recording, in the past few days I've actually been rewatching all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies,
yes,
which is kind of a transition into the movie we're doing today. But just been rewatching them because I realized I hadn't seen some of them since the first time I saw them, which was around the time they came out. Yeah, 2 and 3 and 4 were all relatively new to me because it had been so long.
Wow, that's great. Those are like 3 of the best ones.
Yes, yeah, oh, absolutely. And rewatching them, I was like, oh, these are great. I don't know why I haven't watched them again.
I'm telling you, I remember a long time ago, I was telling you that you'll like 2 a whole lot more than you remember liking it the first time you saw it. Did you?
Yes, absolutely. I remember the first time I saw it as a young man, just being like, what's going on? Because it's so different from the first one.
Oh, yeah.
And now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, like, especially I've seen Never Sleep Again and seen the people who made it talking about it. Like, it's interesting. It's real creative. It takes things in a different direction. It's real ballsy to have done that after how well the first one did.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
To just be like, well, let's go completely different with it.
It's one of those that I feel like it, honestly, I think that if that exact same story would have been presented way later in the franchise, like as, part 5 or part 6 or something like that, I think that people would have been a lot more open to it. But at that point, Freddy was still such a new character. I don't think that people were looking for that angle from it.
Yeah, if it had gone like 1, 3, 4, and then 2, it would have it would have made more sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally so. I like 2 a lot. I think that it's...
Yeah.
I know that it breaks the mythology, like, severely in a lot of parts.
Yes, it does.
But, I mean,
yes,
come on. Like,
does.
all of these old ones, like, the mythology is all fucked anyway. All these old franchises, the mythology does not stick to any sort of straight path anyway, so...
Oh, yeah. And
okay
that's the fun. I mean, Friday the 13th, at a certain point, Jason becomes a superhero. Like,
yeah, just way over the top.
Yeah, so like it's great. I like that. I like the way that it just goes silly, because in the end, what these movies did, and what this movie we're going to talk about today specifically did, was create great production companies that end up making really good movies.
Right. Yeah, totally. They call New Line Cinema, which later brought us the Lord of the Rings trilogy, among other movies. They call it the house that Freddy built.
Yeah. So, like, you know, you look back on these things and it's like, oh, they're silly, they're over the top. But yeah, they went into theaters and they made lots of money off of small budgets and made it possible to make great projects like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, etc. Like, so, you know, I look at them and really just love all of those series. The Hellraisers, the Halloweens. Halloweens are probably the weakest to me, but like
some of the sequels, yeah.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, man. I think of all the old school franchises, like, I probably like the Elm Street flicks the best. I feel like part of it is just, in terms of enjoyability and quality and stuff like that, I feel like they're pretty consistent, at least. And maybe it's because it's one of the first big horror franchises that I actually watched all the way through all of them. Maybe that's part of it, too. It's just the nostalgia effect, you know? But I think something that... And I know a lot of other people feel the same way, too. And I think something that really draws people in about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and the way that sort of the main topic here is nightmares and bad dreams and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really interesting thing, especially for young people, because, you know, sleepy time, your nighttime, your dreams are supposed to be your place of solace and solitude and so on.
Yeah, it's supposed to be safe.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea that you're not even safe whenever you escape from reality, I think is super, super, super frightening. And it's interesting, too, because, you know, if you watch Friday the 13th, not everybody can relate to that because not everybody's been to camp. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've never been to summer camp, so to me that was always just like it was the conceit of the movie that summer camps existed, because to me I didn't have experience with them.
Right, exactly. And you could say that about a lot of these other franchises too, where it's like, if you can't relate to this scenario, you can't really relate to this movie. But that's a cool thing about Nightmare on Elm Street, is everybody sleeps, everybody has dreams, so everybody can relate to this on some level. I think that they chose a really cool premise to write this about. Yeah. In that, you know, dreams are something that unites everybody. Everybody's had experience with that. So I think it makes it very scary and very relatable. And I think that's one of the things, too, that I find really interesting about this movie and about nightmares in general, that I think is very fascinating, is that, you know, even if you've never seen a horror movie even once in your entire life, you know, even if you just totally hate them and you've never watched any of them, you are the scariest horror director in the world to yourself. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Your brain, your subconscious can cook up the most fucked up, horrifying situations that will scare the shit out of you. Totally on its own.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane that our brain needs to do that for some reason.
Yeah.
Like there's some necessity to scaring the shit out of you while you're asleep. And the idea of basing a horror movie on that, of like escaping the reality, I guess, of a lot of the slasher movies that had come up to the point of Nightmare on Elm Street, because those focused on this sort of harsh and stark reality of men stalking and killing women in vulnerable positions.
Right.
And Nightmare on Elm Street makes everyone vulnerable. It's not about women being vulnerable. Like, everyone is vulnerable because you're asleep. You're in this state where you can't do anything.
Right.
And so, yeah, and we've all experienced the nightmare. We've all experienced that feeling. And so, yeah, this movie really just draws on that fear that we all know.
Pretty interesting stuff. So I think that's part of what made this franchise so enjoyable and so relatable for everybody, is because actually everybody is the best horror director in the world, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty interesting stuff. And on a similar topic to that, I think it'd be a fun idea if we started this episode out by talking about our own top 3 sickest nightmares that we've ever had. The ones that
Lightning crash! Sorry, I just got that sound effects board.
Dude, it sounds
really
so
good.
Convincing. It's really good.
It is. It's really good.
But I think that everybody has a couple of those nightmares that they had, probably especially when they were little kids and stuff, that have stuck with them for a lifetime, that they can still remember super, super vividly. They're just burned into their heads, which I think is really cool because, like, I know that I have these images burned into my head of these dreams that I had when I was, like, 4 or 5 years old. And I can clearly remember those pictures in my head right now. And it's interesting because those things never happened. You know what I mean? Like, they only happened in my head. I'm not remembering pictures of something I saw in real life.
Ben, I have an entire dreamscape in my head, and there is a house in my head that recurs in my nightmares.
Whoa.
And it's not a house I've ever seen. It only exists in my dreams. From the outside, it's like a small sort of farmhouse that's like graying from sun exposure, and inside it is humongous and just dark and filled with all these different rooms and things. And I've been to it so many times in my dreams. Sometimes it's a nightmare, and sometimes it starts out as a regular dream where I just walk into this house and then I realize that this house is a nightmare.
Whoa, that's fucking
it's
rad.
crazy.
What'll you do if you ever go there?
I have seen a house that kind of looked like it one time, and it was the first time I had ever seen it, and it almost it was like one of those real strange, like, question all of your beliefs moments where it was like, what the hell? Like, how would I have an idea of a house I've never seen like that clearly in my head?
This sounds like the subject of like a King Diamond record.
It is. We're working on it right now. They called me up. They were like, we have some ideas, and I was like, scrap it. I got this.
That's rad. Well, I'll tell you, the first one that I think of when I'm thinking about the top 3 nightmares that I've had whenever I'm thinking about this list right here, there's this one that I had, and I had it so long ago that I can't even tell you when I had it, but it must have been when I was probably like, maybe 5 or something like that. Mm-hmm. I had this dream that my entire family were aliens.
Okay.
That I was human, but they had just kind of like found me or adopted me or something like this, and that they were all aliens. They were wearing like human suits, but then like at nighttime after I went to bed, they were like these big like meatball shaped like meat alien things, and that basically they were just keeping me around to like sell me or eat me or something like this. Like I was some sort of a food source or something. And it was fucking crazy. And like at the end of the dream, like my mom and my dad, my brother, who were all these big meatball-looking alien things, like kind of had cornered me in the hallway of our old house and stuff. And I was like, "The jig is up!" And then I woke up.
The jig is up. You turned into Don Pardo for a second.
Yeah.
The jig is up. The steam pedal. That is interesting. I've never had anything close to that. That's really cool. Like that's a type of horror or type of nightmare I've never heard of.
What do you got?
Well, the first one I want to talk about is my mom started dating this guy who his house was formerly the caretaker's house of a funeral, or not a funeral home, but a cemetery.
Oh shit!
And so it was right next to the cemetery. And
Metal.
We ended up living there for like 3 years, and my sister and I lived in a room in the basement. So.
Oh wow! The room in the basement of the house by the cemetery.
Yeah, that just sounds like a great, like, scary young adult novel.
Totally, absolutely.
Anyway, so the first night actually that my mom took us over there, he was having a get together, and there were a bunch of people there. And at about 9:30, my mom took us up to his room and laid us in his bed and put us to bed. Mm-hmm. Good mom, way to go.
Way to go.
I woke up maybe I wouldn't know what time it was, but I woke up, it was probably maybe 30 minutes to an hour later. And when I woke up, you know that experience when you wake up somewhere that is just completely unfamiliar and you're like, where the fuck am I?
Right, yeah, your brain hasn't really caught up to what you're seeing.
Yeah, so multiply that times being 7 and hearing in the distance voices because there was a party downstairs.
Okay.
So I'm hearing all these weird voices completely in the dark, but when we were driving in, I saw the cemetery and was kind of spooked already, and I don't know where I am, and I started looking around and my eyes started adjusting and everything looked like corpses standing around the bed.
Holy shit. Like fucking in like Phantasm or something?
Yes. And then I woke up. I thought I had woken up and was seeing all that, and then I actually woke up. And that was the first time that had ever happened to me, that feeling of waking up in a dream.
Yeah.
And also that experience, because when you do that, have that wake up in a dream, it feels more real. That experience felt so real.
Yeah.
When I did wake up, I was like questioning whether or not it had actually happened, and it just sort of went away when I blinked or something.
Right. And then the rest of the time, you're just kind of waiting to be like, am I still in the dream right now? Am I going to wake up again?
Yes. So that really fucked with me for a long time.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah. What's your next one, Ben?
The next one that I thought about that was really memorable for me, it was much later on in my life. It was probably when I was... we'd moved into our second house, so I think I was probably about 12 or maybe 13 or so at the time, and it was really, really short. But I guess it was my first and so far only, knock on wood, experience with like sleep paralysis. Have you ever had that?
Oh, yes, that's actually something I'm about to talk about.
Oh shit!
Let's hear more.
I've only had it once, and it was during this dream. And it absolutely scared the fucking dog shit out of me because I didn't know what sleep paralysis was. I didn't know that this is something that just sort of happened, sometimes. Yeah. It's a really interesting subject. If you guys don't know what sleep paralysis is, check it out. And there's also, isn't there a movie or a documentary on Netflix about it, right?
On Netflix. Nightmare? It's called, The Nightmare. Uh-huh.
I haven't watched it, but I heard it was really good.
I started to watch it. And I think I was drinking, and it didn't catch me.
Yeah.
So I haven't gone back to it.
Well, in this dream, I woke up in my bed, and as soon as I opened my eyes, there was a human figure that was floating above me. It face to face, like nose to nose, eyes to eyes, floating right above me, and it was a male figure, and for some reason I had this overwhelming knowledge that I was in the presence of Satan. I was in the presence of the ultimate evil.
Yeah, that's a common feeling with sleep paralysis.
It was nuts. So this figure that was above me, it was this bald-headed man, and he almost looked like Buddhist kind of get up, really long flowy pants. He had a wooden bead necklace on, and
was he saying? Wait, did he say, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna"?
He said, "Hadouken, touch up the Hadouken."
Oh, okay, never mind. Not the guy I was thinking of.
He
cool.
Hadoukened me in the face. No, he as soon as he realized that I had woken up, he like floated above me like 5 feet, and then sort of like floated across the room and looked at me. But he was like levitating the whole time. The whole thing was super short, and I was paralyzed. Again, as is common with sleep paralysis, like I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, but it seemed just like I was awake. And all the details in my room, everything was exactly right. Even the lighting was realistic, everything. And I could not move, and I thought Satan was above me. It was fucking crazy. I had never experienced anything like that, and actually haven't since. But that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, that's frightening and fortunate. I experienced sleep paralysis for a long time. It was pretty regular. Ugh. But yeah, I now have a CPAP because I discovered I have sleep apnea, and that was what was causing my sleep paralysis. Wow. The first time I experienced sleep paralysis,
It's your number 2?
Yeah, this is my number 2. I've lived in a number of rooms in basements. I actually love it. If I can get a room without any sort of light coming in, it's the best thing in the world. But the first time that I really experienced sleep paralysis, I think I was 15, and I lived in this room that had no windows. It completely 100% dark when you close the door. And I fell asleep, and I started having this dream that I couldn't move, like just that idea that you're behind your eyes, but like you can't like move anything, like you're still there, but nothing can move.
Right.
Started having this dream, and then I started realizing that like I couldn't move, and like this is how I experience sleep paralysis every time. I don't get I've never seen any black figures. I've never gotten the feeling of being in the presence of evil or anything like that. I have had the thing where what you were talking about, where your eyes are closed, but you're seeing exactly what you would be seeing if your eyes were open.
Right.
And that has to do with the fact that your brain actually absorbs all that information and can recall it if need be. So, like, your brain is showing you what... Because for some reason, I mean, your brain can tell what direction you're in. It can tell, like, it knows where you were looking last. And so, like, with sleep paralysis, you feel like you wake up.
Right.
Like, you get that feeling like you wake up. So I got that feeling like I woke up, but I couldn't move. And this happens every time I've experienced it. I can't move, and so what I have to start doing, because when the first few times I experienced it, I would start freaking out, and I would start trying to breathe really hard, but that you actually end up breathing really, really shallow, and you don't come out of it. So, like, I have to, like, come to and realize I am paralyzed, and then I have to consciously start breathing through my nose slowly.
You got to use your Balinese dream skills.
Yeah, and then I have to keep trying to move my fingers.
Whoa!
And the moment that I can start moving my fingers, that's when I start to come out of it. And then what happens is the moment that I feel that full feeling like I can move my fingers, I wake up. And every time it's like, like every single time. It has never become less scary. I've just become more conscious of what's happening when it's happening.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's very frightening. I don't really experience it anymore. With the CPAP, it keeps my airway unobstructed. I have listen, I am the nerdiest guy in the world. I got a deviated septum. Of course.
I've always wanted to start a death metal band called Deviated Septum.
Lots of heavy breathing.
Oh man, yeah.
Well, Ben, what's your last scary dream?
Man, okay. And this is so hard to describe, but I would say it's the most important scary dream that I've ever had, because it is something that exists only on the fringes of my memory, because I cannot recall exactly what happened in the dream or what it was about, but I see things all the time, and I have my entire life, because I think I had this dream maybe when I was like 3 or 4.
Okay.
But I had this nightmare way back then, and I even still to this day, like damn 30 years later, I'll see something and it will remind me of that dream. I'll be like, oh my god, that was in that dream that I had when I was like fucking 3. It instantly is just like time machine. I'm right back there in that dream. But it's really fucking crazy. Again, I don't even recall what exactly happened in the dream. I know that there was I was in a gymnasium, and then something like fucking crazy and awful happened, and it destroyed everything. And
dodgeball.
It was a dodgeball. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But there's some sort of catastrophic event at this, perfectly normal gymnasium or something, and I'll see things every now and then that'll just remind me of it. Like, one of the things that I'll see sometimes that really freaks me out is if they're like redoing a road and there's like a bunch of busted up like asphalt,
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it will remind me of that dream.
Okay.
It's really strange, but it's like the minute that I see something that reminds me of that dream. And sometimes it's the asphalt thing. There was there's this house that we walk by whenever we walk the dogs that had this huge, gigantic oak tree that got knocked down in a tornado. And it was just like this massive destruction of this gigantic oak tree. And every time I'd walk by it would remind me of the dream. I know all of that stuff sounds completely random and stupid, and it is, but
no.
Whenever I see that shit, it freaks me out. It's really strange, because in that dream, again, I don't remember what it was, but I just remember waking up and like going and crawling into my parents' bed, and even at that young of an age, just having the most intense feeling of just imperative doom and dread and just like demise. Is fucking
It's really
weird.
Interesting though that your top dream, you ended up running into your parents' bed, because I also did for my top most frightening dream.
Number 1.
So my sister and I had bunk beds, and my sister, I gave her the top bunk because I never understood what the cool part about that was.
Same. I was a bottom bunker.
Yeah, it's like a cave. It's awesome. You can build a fort there so easily. So I'm on the bottom bunk, and not far from our bunk beds, there was this table that had all my sister's like stuffed animals and dolls on it.
Okay. This sounds a lot like the poltergeist bedroom or something.
It kind of does. I woke up, and I didn't know then, but I would discover I had 103-degree fever.
Oh, shit.
I woke up, and when I woke up, at the foot of where my bed was where the coal-burning stove was. I looked, and the flames were making a shadow look exactly to me at that time like Freddy Krueger.
In your fever-cooked brain.
Yeah, it looked like Freddy Krueger with his like face coming around the corner and his glove, just sort of resting there, ready to come and just slice me up. And I looked over across the room, and I saw all of my sister's stuffed animals and dolls were moving.
Oh.
Like they were all moving. And I was frozen for a little bit, like, what am I gonna do? Freddy's over there, those dolls are over there. I was frozen for a little bit, and then I was like, I have to run, and then I just, like, ran and jumped in my mom's bed, and, she was like, she woke up, and she was like, what's going on? And she touched me, and she was like, you are on fire. And she, like, took me to the bathroom and took my temperature at 103.5 degree fever.
When she said that, was it like NBA Jam? She was like, "You're on fire!
Yeah, you're on fire!" And I was like, "I'm gonna dunk from the 3-point line."
Did you also have the big head coat on?
I did. I had big head, and I was Bill Clinton.
I was about to say, I hope you were Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Anyway,
that's crazy, man. That is crazy.
Yeah, and that because that was so real, because it was hallucination / coming out of sleep situation, like that never really went away. Like, when I think back to that, it's still very real in my head.
At that point, had you seen the Freddy Krueger movies, any of them, or was it just like you'd seen commercials?
Yeah, no, I had seen a couple of them. I'm positive of that, because I don't know if I've made it clear. My family didn't care, didn't think that it was weird for little kids to watch horror movies. So we watched horror movies all the time and loved them. Right
on. I watched this for the first time when I would think I was probably like maybe 20 or 21. I watched this over at now my wife Kate's parents' house with my good buddy Brandon Suttles, who I've mentioned, I know, at least on the audition episode and several others. Brandon is a guy that got me into a whole lot of movies.
Brandon.
Shout out to Brandon. Introduced me to a whole lot of great movies and stuff. So he was like, oh man, you've never seen any of these. We got to sit down and watch these. There's some of his favorites of all time and stuff. So he's like, yeah, we'll sit down and watch the whole franchise. So we went through, a week or two where we just, every other night, we'd sit down and watch one of these movies and stuff. And I loved them. I really, really did. I remember that they were great. Like not as scary as what I was anticipating, but I just really enjoyed them. They just are fun to watch, man. They're really fun flicks.
Yeah, I think we probably both agree that the first one is the best.
Yeah, I totally think so.
Yeah,
it is. I know a lot of people have that hard on for Night Warriors or Dream Warriors. I'm sorry,
Dream Warriors is great. I absolutely love it, but I would never put it above this. I want to talk just a little bit about Wes Craven, just to give some background. I mean, a lot of people have seen Wes Craven movies and don't really know much about him.
Sure.
He's a former English and humanities professor, so we're basically the same person.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
What I'm saying.
Totally.
He then moved on to work in a post-production company that was run by Harry Chapin. That one. Then he went on to directing porn for a little bit.
What? There's Wes Craven porn?
Yeah. He is responsible for some porn. He hasn't admitted to which ones in particular, and I assume they just have directors for scenes. I doubt most porn movies have like a single director. He directed Last House on the Left.
Yeah,
which was produced. Yeah, very fucked up, but like also like depraved, but. I mean, trigger warning. Like, seriously though, like if you have any sort of like experience with rape, you probably don't want to watch it. And it's not easy to watch and it's not fun to watch, but it's certainly horrific.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty raw, man. It's a pretty raw movie.
Yeah, and that was produced by his friend who he had just met recently, Sean S. Cunningham, who went on to create Friday the 13th.
Yeah. I remember reading about that. Yeah.
Wes Craven directed The Hills Have Eyes, which you have to see. If you haven't seen The Hills Have Eyes and The Hills Have Eyes 2, you really should.
Let's go ahead and also reiterate that rape warning on that one too.
Oh shit, yeah.
That is a gruesome movie. It also too, if you watch Hills Have Eyes, like you will see where Rob Zombie got every idea that he's ever had.
Yeah,
it's
The Hills
right
Have
there.
Eyes. The depravity of Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, like, and I would say the just like raw violence of Halloween really are the things that influenced Rob Zombie for sure.
Absolutely.
He also directed Serpent in the Rainbow, which is a great zombie movie, but it's zombie in the sense of the Haitian zombie.
Voodoo.
People Under the Stairs and Scream, among other. He's done so much stuff.
Sure.
But he really is. He's the master of horror. I mean, if you look at his stuff and you look at just what he does in this movie, at the very least, like he finds ways to find new avenues of scaring the shit out of people.
Yeah, definitely so. And it's like you said earlier, like especially when you look at the climate of what other horror movies and slashers were doing during this time period, none of them were reaching into this kind of supernatural, almost fantasy-like sort of element that a lot of this movie has too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure whenever it came out, people were seeing and hearing things that they had never seen before in a flick. So it really struck a chord.
Yeah.
It was a huge success whenever it came out.
Oh yeah, it certainly seems to be influenced by Giallo some.
Yeah.
For sure. Like it brings that like surreal and like dreamlike quality, but it's also very much an American slasher.
Yeah, very much so.
In the end. The cold open to this movie is amazing.
Yeah.
Like
one of my favorite openings of any horror flick ever.
Yeah.
We start with the origin of the glove, which at this point you don't even know what the glove is. Like, as people who our whole lives have been, our whole lives we've known who Freddy Krueger was. But it's really interesting to think that at the first of this movie, when you saw this for the first time in theaters back then, you had no clue what you were seeing, but they already knew this glove is motherfucking iconic.
Yeah, it is, and it also tells you so much about the man making it. It already tells you this is a sadistic asshole.
Yeah,
this is someone who sees killing as a game, not, and he also sees it as theatrical.
I love too, like the really weird aspect ratio that the intro is in. Like when you watch that intro, it's like in a little rectangle that takes up like a third of your screen, and you're going, oh wait, is my aspect ratio wrong? And it's not. It's just supposed to look claustrophobic and draws you in. It's weird, man. I love it.
I think it does something too that like I want to really want to discuss about this movie. What it does is set what's happening here in a different reality than everything else that happens.
Right.
Like, we see this in relation to these black bars in the rolling credits. Like, everything else that happens, we see in a different aspect ratio. So, it's almost like saying, like, for sure this is happening, or this is somehow different than everything else that's happening later. And we do see some elements that make you think maybe most of what happens in this movie is a dream.
Well, it's interesting too, especially when you think about the fact that the movie opens with him making the glove, right?
Uh-huh.
Up until 4, when we start getting more flashbacks and stuff. About like the birth of Freddy. Actually, that might be 5 even. But anyway, for a long time in the series, this is actually the only time that you see Freddy Krueger as he was when he was alive.
Yeah, pre-burns.
Yeah, like this movie starts off with a flashback of the killer. Because the whole rest of the time, it's like he's already been long dead,
Yeah, I believe it is 5, because in 5 we see there's the sort of dream sequence where the nun is raped by the 100 maniacs or whatever.
100 maniacs,
or whatever. Yeah, and we do see Robert Englund is one of the maniacs.
Yeah,
so,
which is fun.
Yeah.
I love the intro to this so much. And then we just get his claws slashing through that like burlap sheet that's sort of hanging across there.
Yeah, and then it skips into Tina's dream. And this is interesting, especially in relation to Suspiria. What we get here, it sets up that Tina might be she's our girl. Like, she's going to be our final girl.
Yeah, total Psycho style kind of fake out.
Yeah, exactly. And Tina, she's the one who seems to be, she gathers some sort of intel about Freddy, and she's the one who alerts everyone who is also, each of her friends are also having dreams about Freddy. They're just not remembering them or not like fully disclosing them.
Right.
But Tina, she's saying like, oh no, this is what happened, and like I remember this and this, and these things are bringing it out from her friends. Her friends are starting to be like, wait, did you say something about his fingernails? And then like they're all remembering, I also had this dream. So Tina seems like at the beginning she might be the one who's gonna figure it all out.
I love that first dream too. She's in that white nightgown, and she's in the school, it looks like,
Yeah.
And
there's
a sheep that like streaks by the screen, which I think is really fucking cool.
Yeah, that is supposed to. I'm pretty positive. Wes Craven was raised very religious, and I'm pretty positive that's supposed to represent that, like, this innocent lamb idea. That these kids aren't being killed like in other slashers. The kids are being killed because they do drugs or have sex or whatever. But these kids aren't being killed for those reasons. These kids are being killed because of the sins of their parents.
Like they're lambs to the slaughter, in other words.
Yeah.
See, I always kind of read it as like counting sheep, like it's sort of a sleep association.
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Well, yeah, that works too. Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty cool. And I love, too, because she's kind of wandering around the school there. And the tone is, like, super dark and gritty. And there's water dripping everywhere. And, like, Freddy's voice just keeps kind of, like, whispering Tina. Just kind of keeps calling her over and over. And so you get the idea that he's sort of ever present. Like, he's never seen here, but you keep hearing his voice and stuff. And then we start getting little glimpses of Freddy in the dream.
I noticed that if you pay attention, in Tina's first dream, we never see Freddy full on. Yeah. We see him like sort of obscured around a corner, and we see her obscured behind her.
Right. Never
like he jumps up behind her. Yeah, but we never really see him. But yeah, Tina's suddenly in the in the bowels of a ship. Like it's just
kind of looks that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Ben, I know you've been on some cruise ships. Have you and the riders of Brohan ever gone down into the bowels and looked for Freddy?
I mean, I haven't, but now I think I've got a mission for my next adventure on the high seas. I think that I do.
I want you and the riders of Brohan to have a Scooby-Doo type adventure in a cruise ship where you're searching for Freddy Krueger.
Awesome. And too, like right at the first of this, whenever Tina wakes up from her dream, from her mom busting in the room there, we start to kind of set up the rules of what's happening. We see that her clothes, her night clothes, have been like slashed open and stuff, and her mom's like, "Oh, you got to cut your fingernails."
Yeah, her mom's the worst by far. Yeah, her mom's so bad.
But I love in horror flicks whenever the mythology is never just like flat out spoken to you, like you're listing off words. Like you make what's the word I'm looking for? You put together the rules just by what you're seeing.
Yeah, there's no need for exposition.
Yes.
It's obvious what happened. Yeah. She was in the dream, he slashed her, she came out of the dream, the slashes stayed. So what Freddy does to you in the dream happens in real life. We got it. There's no need to ever even say those words.
Yeah.
And we get it, like that's an amazing part about this script. This script is so tight.
Yeah.
Like it flows so well. There's not a lot of superfluous dialogue. Everything sort of serves to give us a further understanding, but also to keep us in the dark about what's going on with Freddy.
One thing that's cool too that we see in the next shot, where the kids are going to, we see Tina and Nancy and Rod and Glenn, played by old Johnny Depp, walking to school. Something I didn't notice until I watched about half of the movie last night with the director commentary on.
Yeah.
There's that shot, and the shot pans from left to right, and whenever it starts, it's the slow motion little girls doing the jump rope, right? Which we know from the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You kind of jump rope song, right? That pans left to right to the kids pulling up to the curb in Glenn's car, and I hadn't even noticed it until they pointed it out, but like all in one shot, this one tracking shot, you have this fuzzy, blurry, dreamy focus of the girls jump roping in slow motion, and then the filter comes off and it's normal vision and totally up to normal frame rate too, all in one shot. Which, this isn't like they did it in post digitally.
No.
They actually did that. They said they had like 6 people working the camera to do that one shot. I hadn't noticed it, and that's fucking amazing, dude.
Which is probably why you have to go with the take where Rod says, up your ass with a twirling lawnmower. Like, that makes any fucking sense. What is a twirling lawnmower? all of them twirl, whether from the center or by you pushing them along. Like, they all twirl.
There's a twirling element to all of them. It's a little superfluous to say that, but they were like, well, we nailed the slow motion part, so we just got to go with it.
This shot, I would say, an argument could be made that from this shot to the end, all a dream. Because we start on the fuzzy shot of the girls, and they're 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. It comes from left to right onto them in the drop-top caddy. Then at the end, they're in the drop-top caddy, and then from right to left to the girls jumping rope.
Well, here's the fun question, too. If the whole movie from that point on is a dream, whose dream is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, the ambiguity at the end and the ending in general are the main things I would say are negative about this movie.
Right.
But I do like an ambiguous ending, but I think that this one is far too ambiguous. And I know
made
that
him do it.
Yeah, I know from watching Never Sleep Again that this was a studio issue. This was like a problem where Wes Craven didn't get to go with what he wanted to do. Right. But again, because what the studio wanted was the possibility of sequels, and those sequels again made Lord of the Rings possible. It's hard to question it, even though I think it's a detriment to this movie. It's also a positive in the end. So,
well, what I think is fun to explore as you watch this movie, especially with the notion that basically, like what you're saying, everything that you're seeing here at the first of the movie is a dream. Or actually, through the whole movie, from the first of the movie, is a dream.
Yeah.
Is that this whole movie is actually Nancy's mom's dream, kind of brought along by the guilt of killing Freddy and stuff.
That would make sense with the ending, yeah.
Because if the whole thing's a dream, it doesn't make sense for Nancy to be dreaming about herself sleeping.
No.
And then also, too, at the very end, one of the rules that we see set up through the movie is that if you die in your dream, you die in real life. And at the end, again, assuming this whole movie is Nancy's mom's dream, she dies at the end. We're to assume after Freddy pulls her through that window.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I mean, according to the rest of the series, she did die. Because obviously Nancy didn't die. Nancy's back in part 3.
Yeah. And, it seems like the ending... Yeah, that would make sense, that the dream then is the mother's dream. I think, okay, because, like, this movie has to be looked at two ways. One, Wes Craven wanted this to be one movie. Like, right. So if we look at it from the way he wanted us to see it, the end of this movie is the end. But... two, this movie is not the end, and there are 7 sequels and then a remake. So there are two ways to definitely see it, and I think if we see it as Nancy's mother's dream, it can still work with the sequels.
Yeah.
But also in the sequels, we find out that all those deaths did happen, so it couldn't have possibly been a dream.
Yeah.
If that was the case. So. Right. Yeah.
But it's fun to watch with that in mind.
It is. It's real fun to watch with that in mind. So, like, it could all be a dream. So they're talking, Tina is telling them about the dream, and as I said, like, some of that's coming out. And we find out Rod is kind of a piece of shit. And they're all gonna get together at Tina's house because Tina's mom is leaving for the weekend. And there's like an actual like funny scene, like a very charming scene, I thought.
Yeah, totally. Where Glenn's faking making the phone call to his mom, playing the boombox tape of like, oh, I'm out at my friends at the airport or whatever.
Yeah, and I had one problem with this, is that Glenn, instead of telling his mom, I'm hanging out in the suburbs with my girlfriend and her friend, told his mom that I'm going to 1980s Long Beach. Which is where Snoop Dogg grew up. And I've listened to, I believe, all of Snoop Dogg's albums. I'm pretty positive it wasn't a great area. And then also in that scene, the sound effects tape that they're using to pretend to be like landing jets plays gunshots.
It does.
Now, as the mother, I would be like, what the fuck is going on over there? I would call and then find out, shit, Glenn's not even over there.
Yeah. Damn.
Anyway.
At that slumber party, too, is where we get the awesome second dream, which is sort of Tina and Nancy dreaming simultaneously, it would seem. Tina is having her dream about being woken up by some rocks being thrown at the window, which actually, you know that part where it looks like a rock stuck in the window?
Uh-huh.
That's actually a tooth.
What?
Yeah. And if you watch it again, you can kind of tell, but they talked about that in the commentary. That's a fucking tooth stuck in the glass.
That's insane.
Which is way twisted to me.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Now this, I mean, we do have to mention, in case someone doesn't know, that originally Wes Craven meant for Freddy to be referred to as a child molester.
Yeah.
But a lot of child molestation cases were around that time, and he didn't want to seem like he was trying to, make money cash in off that.
Yeah.
But the idea then that's a tooth, and where he would have gotten a tooth, that's gross. That grosses me out. Yeah.
And two, that's where we also get Nancy dreaming. And this is where we get the super iconic thing where they just stretched out a big sheet of spandex above her bed, and Freddy's like pressing through it.
God, the special effects in this are so great.
Yes.
Like the fact that all of this is practical is so great. Like
it couldn't look better.
Looks awesome. It looks so good when he like pushes onto that. It looks so ghostly and like
and it catches really all the like hard contours of his face, like his concave eyes, and then like the claw and his outstretched other hand just make it look like he has like gigantic talons, like a monster. But at this point, you still don't know what the image of Freddy is. If you're seeing this for the
we haven't
first
seen
time.
him.
Yeah.
So in Tina's dream, Tina's running, and then we finally see full-on Freddy, and in our first viewing of Freddy, he's warped. His arms are stretched out super long.
Yeah.
So it's so dreamy. Like when she runs, she's like running in place.
That's a cool
when
shot.
she sees him, everything is warped. Like it's so dreamlike. And this is something that I think each successive sequel kind of lost. It kind of went less from being a dream and more to being like a fantasy. Like each kid was having their fantasy. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
This is very dreamlike, and
I know a lot of people complain about the quality of the effects on the super long arm scene.
Well,
I'm totally okay with it, man, because like whenever I have dreams and stuff is like weird, it doesn't really look right.
Yeah, if it looked right, like if it looked too correct, that would be reality. It's a dream. Everything should look a bit off.
Yeah, so I'm totally okay with that. And then even like how it goes from the long arm shot to in the next scene, his arms are perfectly normal. Like that's kind of dream logic, which I totally love seeing in flicks.
Yeah, and they start wrestling around, and she has what I was talking about earlier. She wakes up in the dream where she thinks she's waking up, but she's not. She's in the bed wrestling with Freddy, and she rips his face off.
Yeah.
Which, again, like, this is, like, something Wes Craven was pushing, I think, throughout this movie, that when we see Freddy, we never, at first it's like we don't see him fully, or we see him warped. Like Freddy's presence doesn't become like full on Freddy until he's really fighting in the end. Mm-hmm. So like in these early parts he's warped, so his face gets ripped off, and this scene is fucking awesome. And again, I recommend you watch the documentary Never Sleep Again and find out more about this. But basically they used like a room that they were able to turn all the way around, and they used so much blood. Like this is just the bloodiest scene.
Yeah, dude.
But
I remember like the first time that I watched this scene, it really, really, really did blow my mind. They filmed it in like the rotating room where Tina is like crawling all over the ceiling, like defying gravity, and her body is being like twisted and thrown around through the air. I still don't really know exactly how they did that one shot. And
yeah, that was interesting.
And she's covered in blood, and she's like leaving like a streak of blood up the wall and up the ceiling and shit. And she's screaming bloody murder, and you don't even see what's happening. Like Freddy's invisible, and he's like shredding her skin through and stuff.
Yeah,
I think it's in my opinion, I think it's the best kill of the entire franchise, and it's the first one that happens.
Yes, and like when she drops and the blood just splashes on Rod, like,
could you imagine having your girlfriend's blood splash all over you? Fuck.
Yeah, but that's the thing about like what I really love about this is that Wes Craven goes from the dreamlike fear logic to just full-on reality, which is what you always hear on any of those murder shows and like crime shows. Murder scenes are just so bloody, like so much bloodier than you could imagine.
Right.
And this, like, she goes from a dream state to this reality of just blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's sickening, and it hits him in the face. Like, that is like a real great image of the reality of her dead and her blood just hitting him in the face. I really love this scene. Really good.
It is. Yeah. It's fucking best. And then Rod runs off because he's got, I guess you kind of get the impression that he's sort of a bad dude that has kind of a prior record. So
because he pulled out a switchblade earlier, and as we know, if you've got a switchblade, first off, it's not a knife.
It's a switchy.
Don't bring that motherfucker to a knife contest because it's not a knife.
Mm-mm.
But anybody with a switchblade is a dirtbag.
Instantly. I was taught this through the entirety of my childhood.
Yep.
Anybody with a switchy is a bad guy.
So Rod's a bad guy.
Yeah, so he runs off, and then we get that scene with the mom and the dad and Nancy in the police office. Nancy's dad is the police chief or whatever there. He's like, what were you doing over there? Yada, yada, yada.
We find out as we go, her mom is attentive. She's a caring mother, but she's also an alcoholic.
Yeah. And then even the next day in the morning there, we get the morning scene with Nancy and her mom. And her mom's having the good old Russian omelet for breakfast, which is to say a glass of vodka.
Yeah, hold the eggs. Uh-huh. Yes.
And Nancy's drinking coffee and stuff because she was having bad dreams. And she leaves the house. And this is one of those things that I always thought was really weird. She leaves the house, and there's like this mystery guy watching her from behind the tree.
Yeah, this is a problem, and we talked about this the first time. What the hell is this? Like, that mystery guy from behind the tree never comes back.
I like to think that maybe like her dad set another police officer on her to like tailor to make sure that she'd stay safe or something, but that is never cleared up, and you never see that guy again. It's really weird.
No. Yeah, so that's like one indication that maybe this is a dream. Because, like, she feels like she's being watched, and she looks and beside a tree she sees a man in black, like, but then also Rod is there, and the other police do show up, so maybe, yeah, you're right, like, maybe it's just some dude who's supposed to be plainclothes, but he was like, I'll dress in black, they'll never notice me.
And be creepy from the bushes. Pretty normal.
Yeah, so Rod grabs Nancy, and he's like, I didn't do it, etc. And then her dad shows up, and we actually see Nancy do this twice in this movie. First, Rod pulls out his switchblade, and Nancy just steps in and grabs it out of his hand.
Kind of hard
and
ass.
Then yeah, she's a badass. And then the next time is her dad sneaks up to arrest Rod and pulls his gun out, and she just steps in front of the gun and like pushes it out of the way. Like she is not afraid of shit.
Well, what you don't know is that she is a Mormon and is wearing her sacred Mormon undergarment.
Oh shit! Yeah, no, those garments will do it.
Impervious to bullets, can't be cut through.
They can't.
So she was like, I got this. I got this.
You could lose your limbs and your head. Your body will be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why she was never really that scared of Freddy. She was like, what can he do? Cut me? Yeah, right.
I got the power of Mormon on my side.
The great Mormon.
With his fiery pumpkins.
And then we get the her in class, and this is where we have the next dream sequence too, where the guy is standing up reading from Shakespeare, and his voice changes and gets all weird, which is cool. I love this dream sequence too when we see Tina in the body bag out in the hallway. God, that's so cool. And the body bag has like blood all over it, and it's clear, and she gets dragged off and shit.
Yeah, and they're dragging it with like wires, so you can't. Like, it looks like an invisible person is dragging her. It looks so cool.
I love it, man. And she follows her down into the boiler room. And this is cool too because we get another bit of rules about Freddy and stuff. And again, more rules about his dreams or about the dream sequences and so on. In this dream, we see Freddy like cut his chest open, and he's got like worms and stuff in him, which is crazy. And Nancy burns herself on one of the boiler pipes to wake herself up. So it shows that even you, the dreamer, have power in the dreams. Yeah. And then whenever she wakes up, of course, she has the burn on her arm.
Yeah, she doesn't notice it at first, which is interesting because we see it. Like, it's very clearly there. Right. But, like, she doesn't notice it at first. She walks out of the school and then notices it.
I think it's just her adrenaline was going so hard she didn't notice it, you know?
Yeah, because she screams and, like, really fights to get out of that dream. She is now introduced to this world, and she's pretty clear that she believes Rod. She believes Rod didn't do it, and now she's thinking, okay, so this is probably what happened, right? Like, this guy killed her in the dream, and it killed her in real life. So she goes to talk to Rod at jail, and so she is asking Rod, like, you know, some questions, and she finds out that Rod has also seen this guy in his dream.
Right. And is that when she goes home and takes a bath, and we get the cool, iconic bathtub dream scene, right?
Yeah.
I love the claw coming up out of the tub. Fucking awesome. Super iconic. I love this scene, too, though, because, like, I've had a lot of like drowning type dreams myself.
Yeah.
And I think that this captured it really well. I love how it almost looks like she's falling through like a hole in ice. Like you can see that one spot where you can see there's like a hole at the top where she could swim through, but she's being pulled down and stuff. It's really cool. It's also interesting too that there's some nudity in this scene. There's a little bit of side boob action. But this movie doesn't really, like, sexualize it very much the same way that you'd see in, like, the 13th movies or something like that where, you know, it's, like, full-on sex and violence. Like, this isn't really about that. It's like, well, she's in bath. Logically, she would be naked, but let's not make it, like, a sexy thing. Her mom hears her struggling around and wakes her up and stuff, and Nancy wakes up and she gets those Jesse Spano caffeine pills out of the medicine cabinet.
She's so excited.
She can be so excited. And so scared.
Jesse Spano stole this. Jesus, Jesse.
And then that's when Glenn shows up at her window, and she has that funny line where she looks in the mirror and she's like, I look 20 years old because she hasn't slept in a week or whatever.
But Heather Langenkamp actually was 20 years old, so that's a even funnier joke. Yeah.
And she asks Glenn to stay awake and guard over while she sleeps and stuff because she's basically going to go looking for Freddy in her dream. So that's when we start the next dream sequence, which I think this is interesting too because I see a lot of people complain. They're like, oh, okay, what is this rule? Like, Glenn is in her dream? No, he wasn't. Like, that's just her dreaming that he was in the dream. Like, I don't know. I don't think I need to explain that further. It's like, to me, it's like, no, he's not actually there because he never has any memory of it. He's never like, whoa, that was weird. I was just in your dream.
I mean, in regards to future movies, I could see how somebody might think that's what is happening because in future movies that is a common
that's Dream Warriors rules.
Yeah, but in this one, no. She is thinking that Glenn is there, but Glenn, he couldn't stay awake for a couple of minutes. Like every time she asks this dude to stay awake, he falls asleep almost immediately. Like. Later, he falls asleep with a TV resting on his junk. Like, how? Yeah. How would you fall asleep?
And Miss Nude America on TV.
Yeah. What? Come on, Glenn. Miss Nude America was never on black and white TV.
And this is where it's interesting, too, because this dream is almost more like astral projection. Because she, in her dream, goes to the police station. It's interesting, too, because she's kind of walking around her neighborhood, and then suddenly she's at the police station, which is, again, dream logic, where you'll just change location suddenly we see a bunch of that in this movie, which I think is really neat too.
Yeah, and she sees what's going on in Rod's cell, which is Freddy is going to kill him. He's going to hang him. And
I love too that we see the Tina in the body bag kind of haunting her again, and she has that centipede come out of her mouth, and she has like the big... Dude, one that I can't figure out is there's like a huge pile of eels at her feet. What the fuck is that about?
It's gross. I mean,
like, the centipede I can understand. It's like if you're buried in the ground and you're being eaten by bugs and stuff, yeah, maybe there'd be a centipede in your mouth, but
you haven't heard
eels
of...
at the feet.
It's a California thing. We got ground eels.
Oh, California ground eels. Interesting. What do you guys think up next up there? And so she tries to run back to the house, right? Because Freddy's chasing her and stuff.
Yeah, and she sort of wrestles around with him a little bit, and
That's where she steps through those oatmeal steps.
Yeah, which is a cool scene. Like, that's something I've experienced so many times in my dreams, like where I'm running and I can't move, or I'm trying to like fight off something that's trying to attack me, but it's like I'm punching underwater. I really like the stairs scene. Yeah,
they could have done it a little bit better. It looks kind of shot, but it was still pretty neat. I like the concept more than I like the execution. Kind of like when actually in that same scene Freddy's at the door and he's wearing like Tina's face, but it just kind of looks like he's wearing like a catcher's mitt on his face, and he pulls it off and he's like, "It's me, Freddy." It's pretty lame, but I like the concept.
So she basically wrestles her way out of this dream, and then she's like, "Geez, Glenn, you couldn't stay up for a second?" And he's like, "I'm wearing a belly shirt." And
what can I do?
I'm sorry. So,
one thing that I did notice this time too that I'd never noticed before is while she's wrestling around with Freddy in the dream, he like slashes one of those pillows, right? And there's feathers flying everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, whenever Nancy wakes up and then Glenn has to bolt out through the window, she looks over there at the window and there is one of the feathers falling in front of the window.
Oh. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is awesome. So yeah, she wakes up and gets Glenn, and they go down to the police station to check up on Rod. And of course, this movie is like built on the idea that adults don't listen to kids.
Right.
So like they're not really listening to Nancy, and if they did, they maybe would have saved Rod from being hung in his cell by Freddy.
Right.
And there's like a cool scene of the sheet like tying itself around his neck, which they actually did in reverse. They had it tied around his neck and sort of pulled it off with a string. Yeah, really cool stuff. So anyway, yeah, Rod dies, and they have a funeral the next day where the priest says something dickish like
I love it. He says, "He who lives by the sword dies by the sword."
Yeah. Like, Rod, first off, hey guy, Rod didn't have a sword, okay? And the Bible doesn't say anything about switchblades, though I'm sure if they got around to it, they would say, "Thou shalt not have a switchblade, for he who hath a switchblade is a dirtbag." Like,
and that's when we get to that Nancy is being taken into the Sleep Institute, which you can tell is a very technical research laboratory, especially by the fact that the mom is smoking there in the observation room. He has a poster of a little kitty on a San Francisco trolley car, and also just talks openly about how he has no idea what dreams are, and they're just a bunch of body and mind hocus pocus.
And what I was really surprised by is at no point does he mention Jessica Rabbit or the Dip, because he's the voice of motherfucking Roger Rabbit.
Bullshit. No way.
Yeah. That
the sleep doctor guy?
That's Roger Rabbit.
Holy shit.
What if just at one point, just for a second, he was like, "Please don't smoke."
So Nancy's having these crazy dreams, and she's being monitored and stuff, and she's going nuts, and she wakes up, and she becomes Rogue from X-Men. She has a little streak of gray hair.
Yeah, which she keeps throughout when she's in the third one, so that's always fun.
I think that's cool, too. And she has the hat. She pulled the hat off of his head in the dream, and suddenly she has a hat.
So we also learn, again, without exposition, that whatever they do to him can affect him.
Yeah.
So she can maybe pull him into reality.
And again, that's just such cool, classy storytelling and letting you know what the rules of the monster are. It never out and out says it. You just figure it out based on what happened, which I love seeing that kind of storytelling in movies and games and everything else.
Yeah. And then there's the convo between her and Glenn where he tells her about Balony's dream skills. And she tells him about booby traps and improvised antipersonal devices.
She has the first ever publishing of the Anarchist Cookbook.
Yeah, she's ready to roll. And it actually tells us a good bit about him, because earlier he says, you know, if you're ever having a bad dream, just tell yourself you're having a bad dream and wake up. Like, he's got this sort of he's got this idea that dreams are a separate universe and they can't hurt us, but she's come to understand that no, like, they can actually affect us and maybe we can affect them. So she's thinking practically, I'm gonna set up some fucking booby traps.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this motherfucker.
I'm gonna Home Alone this son of a bitch.
Yeah, she Kevin McAllister's the fuck out of it too. She comes home and there's all these bars on the windows that her mom's had installed, I guess, to keep her safe or whatever. And that's when her mom tells her the whole talk about Freddy Krueger, about how he was a filthy child murderer that killed 20 kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I mean, that's a ton of kids in one neighborhood. How big is this neighborhood?
That's a child-rich community.
He might have been doing them a service. Like, it seems almost like they had a plague of children.
Yeah, really. He's like, this is just overrun.
He's like the Pied Piper. He was like, oh, I see you got all these kids. I can help you out.
Holy shit. He's just a dark Pied Piper.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, like she's set this up so Nancy can't get out, and also Glenn can't Dawson's Creek his way in.
Yeah.
So like Nancy's of course upset with her mom because she's like, hey, I got some serious shit going on, and her mom's like, I got some serious vodka going on, so we both got shit. Like, Nancy comes up with this idea. She's going to go into the dream and pull him out and, kill him. But she needs Rod to call and wake her up. So she's trying to call Rod, but his parents they're tired of the bullshit, and they just decide, no, leave our Rod alone, you evil woman. It's real interesting because when Rod dies and when Glenn dies, there's not really much to it. Like, we don't see them having these nightmares.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about the movie that I was hoping that we were going to talk about, is like, Freddy really fucks with the ladies. The guys, he just smokes them, and it's no big deal.
Yeah. And this is part of the great storytelling. It indicates to us that those little girls that are skipping rope are probably his victims, and he killed girls specifically.
Right.
He killed young girls. So he doesn't waste his time torturing Rod and Glenn. He just kills them.
Yeah.
But with the girls, he's interested in seeing them scream. He wants to see them react. That's why with Tina, like, he cut off his finger and like laughed, and then with Nancy, he did the thing where he cut open his skin and there were the disgusting worms and shit.
And he even lets, I think, is it Tina? He even lets Tina like rip his face off, almost to be like, yeah, you can't even hurt me. Yeah.
But with Rod here, or with Glenn here, what we see is he reaches up, pulls him into the bed, and then Glenn becomes all of the blood. Like,
all the blood in the world.
All the blood in the world comes out of Glenn. So we find that Glenn probably deserved this because he was criminally not donating blood constantly.
I love that scene of his death and just the completely unrealistic, ridiculous geyser of blood that shoots out of his bed. I think that's badass.
Yeah, and they also use that same room that they could turn around to do that. and used so much blood that didn't someone get shocked?
Yeah, because basically there's a bare exposed light bulb on a lamp.
Yeah.
And one of the guys pouring the blood from the top of the room, totally got electrocuted by that.
Yeah, the hazards of making awesome movies.
And I love, too, whenever the paramedics show up, and that one guy's like, we're not going to need a stretcher up here. We're going to need a mop.
Real insensitive.
Yeah, I was going to say, it totally reminds me of that part
Rod.
in Hot Rod, where he's like, I give the old man a week. And he's like, it's pretty insensitive, Jake, or whatever he says. It's so good.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of. And so Nancy, she sees all the hullabaloo across, and she calls, and her dad talks to her, and she says, Dad, listen, I'm going to need you to come over here in 20 minutes. Now, listen, no matter what Nancy asks people to do, they never do it.
No, huh?
But if they would, Nancy would have had this problem solved long ago, right? Like, Nancy's the only one who knows what's up. She's the only one who's figured this out, and the only one who's figured out, like, an actual plan to stop it. But no one will listen to her. So she goes into her dream to bring Freddy back out. And she's set up all these great booby traps. She's got a sledgehammer ready to just hit him in the old breadbasket. Yeah, she got some tripwires with some improvised explosives.
Yeah.
Like, she's ready to go.
I would have loved to seen like a scene of like her drunk mom just like stumbling around the house, like fucking up all of them, like, getting hit with sledgehammers and blowing up light bulbs. She's drunk as fuck, just not understanding what's happening.
That would be so funny.
Now, there's a cool thing here in this dream that I thought was really interesting that, again, I only noticed this time through. Okay, so Nancy goes in, like, the boiler room, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, where the fuck is she, though? Because she finds a huge collection of things that belong to all of her friends that got killed, which I didn't notice this until this time.
Yeah.
There is the blue blanket that Tina and Rod were sleeping under whenever Tina got killed.
Yeah.
How the fuck would Nancy know what that blue blanket even looks like? There's Rod's switchblade. There's the crucifix that was above her bed, and there's Glenn's headphones.
I love that the thing that really defines Rod is a switchblade.
Yeah, it's like, well, he's a switchy kind of guy, so
he's a switchblade type person. You know the type. Yeah, that's interesting, and that's actually something that sort of carries over. Is that he sometimes keeps trophies. It depends on the director.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
But yeah, he's kept trophies of this, which is very serial killer like of him, and probably should have continued throughout the movies. Yeah, that's really interesting. So she starts to fight with him in the dream world. I mean, she's no dummy. She knows she's gotta trick him. She's gotta get him into the real world. So what does she do, Ben?
Well, she jumps off of this thing in the boiler room, which then makes her land onto the fallen like trellis, like the rose trellis that Linda used to climb, which is cool. Again, I love the changing of locations. Very
completely
very
weird geometry.
Yeah, I love that, and it's cool too because like she wakes up. And she wakes up in her bed, and she has the trellis on her, and then the trellis, like, disappears. There's some cool, like, there's an extra, dude there just throwing that off of her for the rest of the camera shot. I like that shot, too.
Yeah.
And so then Freddy Krueger's in the room with her. In the waking world, it would seem, right?
Yeah.
And she starts pulling all the traps on him. He gets hit by the sledgehammer and falls down the steps, and gets lit on fire, which is pretty awesome. I would imagine for somebody who was burnt to death, being lit on fire would be pretty bad.
Well, I guess all of your nerve endings would be dead, but it would also be like, not this again.
Yeah, not this shit again.
Trying to kill the person trying to kill you by setting them on fire is maybe not the best thing to do when you're in your house,
especially in like an 80s house that was covered in wall-to-wall carpet and asbestos.
Yeah.
I like too when he falls down the stairs. There's that really long scene of which actually at the time was the longest burn scene that had ever been put on
the
film.
longest continuous burn, yeah.
Which is badass.
Because he falls down the stairs, gets up, tries to go back up them, all while actually on fire. That stuntman, he was a badass.
He earned his pay that day. I love when he falls down the stairs, too, because he makes a bunch of, like, Schwarzenegger noises. He's like, oh. We get that scene of Nancy and her dad has come over there now and busted down the door and stuff, and they go upstairs to the mom's room just in time to see Freddy still on fire on top of her. Yeah. And Dad, like, throws the blanket over him so they could have a little bit of fucking privacy. And
yeah, he's like, geez, guys, don't have sex in front of my daughter, especially on fire. I know that's your weird fetish.
Freddy was turning Dad into a major league cuck.
Oh, man. That dad was like, I'm going to vote for Hillary. But we disagree. MAGA.
And that's the ultra weird scene of Nancy's mom's death, where suddenly the bed is like a vortex and she's just a skeleton, and she kind of like gives a peace out wave and just sort of disappears.
She does. She's kind of just like, hey, see you later.
I'm out.
And then the dad's like, well, I'll leave you in this room to contemplate, I guess. I don't know.
He doesn't seem too blown away. I think he's been like, I've seen her do this shit before. This is why we got fucking forced.
Oh my God. Listen, if you haven't seen your mother burnt down to the bones and floating away into a cloud, you've just not been paying attention, Nancy.
He was like, she does this shit for attention. Always the same old shit with this one.
So he leaves the room, and of course, then Freddy shows back up, and Nancy tries the classic Glenn defense of I'm taking away your power.
I'm fighting the power.
I'm not even gonna look at you, Freddy. That'll show you.
What if it would have started playing like "Take Back the Power" by Rage Against the Machine right there? Damn, it would have been hard.
And then a younger Zach De La Rocha is sitting at home, and he's just like, okay, what? All right, what is this? Okay.
Maybe that's what that song's actually about.
That song is about him watching Nightmare on Elm Street and hearing his own song from the future.
Yeah, much later, in a secret interview, you'd be like, people think my songs are about political revolution. They about fighting Freddy Krueger.
Bulls on Parade? That's about me wishing bulls would kill Freddy Krueger.
Like all of them about that.
All of them.
Bomb Track? That's about the exploding light bulbs Nancy made.
I hope that's true. Next week we're gonna have Zach De La Rocha on to talk about it. Come with it now.
Yeah, she turns back on him. He like disappears or whatever.
Into her ass. Yeah, he like turns into like sort of TV static at her ass and then disappears.
Yeah.
And suddenly she wakes up into what is obviously not reality because it's so like fuzzy and everything. And she's walking out the front door with her mom, who's now alive.
And not drinking.
And not drinking, yeah. She's holding up a newspaper of today's date and a mug of not alcohol. She's just like, look, I'm done. No longer an alcoholic. I was saved by floating away into space. And so Nancy like runs to catch the convertible with her friends to drive off, and of course as they get in the convertible, the top just suddenly comes up and it's Freddy's sweater colors. Oh no. And they start to drive off, and we see those little girls skipping rope, but that's not enough for the ending. We also then see Freddy smash his hand through the little window on the front door and pull the mom through.
Maybe like 2 square feet of a hole. Pulls this full-grown woman through it.
Uh-huh. And then the end.
It's a nightmare! Then we get that sick song.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nightmare!
Now, the ending is the worst for me. Like, it's not good. I don't like it. I don't like even Wes Craven's idea of the ending. Like, I don't like the idea that she turns her back on him and doesn't give him power, and that
It's true.
That kills him.
It's a little weak. It is a little weak.
Yeah.
There probably could have been something, if they'd spent a little more time on it, come up with something a little bit more appropriate.
This movie is great, though. I mean, talking about likes and dislikes of this movie, it's the likes are Freddy Krueger, the Robert Englund's inhabitation of this terrifying character that just becomes more and more frightening and also more and more silly throughout the series. But Robert Englund in this first one, he plays it just so menacing, and the glove, I would also say, like the design of the glove.
Oh yeah.
The idea to just stick with that glove, that's his tool for killing.
I think that's cool too, because it's almost like by choosing for him to have like a glove as like an extension of his hand, it almost makes his killings more animal-like, because it's not like he's holding a gun and shooting somebody from a distance, or even holding a knife where it's this separate object away from him.
It's like a claw. Yeah. It's like an animal claw. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that makes his killing a little bit more twisted and up close and personal.
As we've said, I love the setting within the dream, using that to draw fear out of the audience is a really great idea. I like the screen. I like this script. I think that there was an obviously concerted effort to make the action tell the story, and to make the story sort of unfold without ever, other than the section where she's like undergoing the dream analysis or whatever at the hospital. Other than that, there are no real exposition scenes. But even the exposition in that is not, I mean, because all he's really saying is, we don't know what dreams are.
And then he's like, oh, look, she's having one.
Yeah, look, there's a dream.
Whoops, there's a dream.
Shaka laka, shaka laka. The dislikes, the ending, as I said, acting's not strong from some of the people. Like there are some definitely like well done scenes, some good acting, but overall there's some moments that definitely are a little embarrassing or not great.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I guess that the stair scene, like I wish that it looked a little better, but I also know from the documentary that Wes Craven didn't actually even want to do it. And it was Bob Shaye's idea. And so maybe he was doing it just sort of to get it out of the way, but like, I wish they had done that so that it looked a little better, because it's pretty obvious where where she steps, that it's just a big pool of like oatmeal or whatever. So yeah, it's hard for me to come up with any major dislikes though, because I think it does a great job. This is a great movie. What about yourself, Ben?
I'd say as far as likes go, a lot of the same stuff that you mentioned, where the way that Freddy is played in this movie, I think is really different than the other ones. 2 is probably the closest, and then it seems like starting with 3, they start playing a lot more with him being able to morph his body into pretty much anything, almost like he's made out of silly putty or something. And then, of course, we just start getting super wisecracking, very cartoonish Freddy in a lot of the movies past that. But I really do think that, like I said, the character of Freddy Krueger is intrinsically fucking terrifying. A child, murderer, and its implied rapist that can attack you in your dreams, and he's unvanquishable even after your mom and dad kill him. Like, that's really fucking scary. So I really like the way that he plays him in this movie. They don't really show him very much, and it's an interesting thing too about Freddy in this movie is that very, very similar to like Hannibal Lecter's character in like Silence of the Lambs. Actually, Freddy is barely in this movie. Freddy Krueger gets about 7 minutes worth of screen time across this entire movie.
Yeah, that is something I noticed watching it again, was that he's not in it a lot.
But you feel like he just dominates the movie. But he's barely in it at all. I think that's really, really cool. Another thing I really like about Freddy and the way they chose to play him in this too is all the scenes in the dreams where he's talking, whether it's like him just saying the name of whoever it is that he's torturing in his dream or whatever. Anytime that you hear him talk, the sound design for his voice is really weird. They've obviously added like a little bit of a distortion or something to his voice, but also even acoustically, his voice doesn't seem to resonate in the same room as the dream, if that makes sense. Like, his voice seems like it's happening in some other place than the environment that the dream is taking place in. Watch it again next time you see it, and you'll really notice it, where it's like they'll be like in a big echoey boiler room, but his voice sounds very flat with like no echo on it. Like, it's really cool, and I think just kind of makes him seem more all-powerful and all in control of the dream and stuff. I think that's a really cool choice. It might have just been an accident, but I think that it's really rad and adds something subconsciously cool to it.
Yeah.
I'll also add in the category of likes, I think that the score for this movie, I think the soundtrack is fucking awesome. I think it's one of the most interesting and iconic horror themes ever. Typically, whenever we talk about iconic horror themes, of course, Jaws would be one of them with its little tune-up motif.
Yeah.
The little
Halloween.
riff. Yeah, totally. That riff that John Carpenter came up with for Halloween, and of course Tubular Bells and stuff too. But I think that the Elm Street score is super, super underrated. It's got these really super haunting, what we call minor major 7 chords, which I think
everybody knows
those old things. I think that there's some of the eeriest sounding chords because they're essentially kind of like a minor chord that invited part of what you would typically associate with a major chord into it too. So it just sort of has this really tense, uneasy, it doesn't sound resolved, if that makes sense, kind of quality to it. I think it's really cool.
It's like a minor chord was having a minor chord party, but was also dating like a major chord and was like, I want you guys to like him.
It's exactly like that.
But everybody's like, this is real awkward.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's cool too because like the theme is so dark and so scary sounding, but then you know how there's a little part in the theme that has that really sing-songy, it almost sounds like part of like a children's song thing that goes ma 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 like that.
Yeah.
Like the interval between those two notes in the relation to the chord is what we call a major third, which is a primary component of major chords. And so the theme is this decidedly really minor, brooding thing, but then it puts this really childish sing-song major third thing over top of it, which I just think makes it all the more surreal and strange because those notes of that don't actually work with that minor chord structure that's going on behind it. But I think that makes it seem all the more nonsensical and dreamlike in a way.
You know what I like about that is that you just described technically what people actually already hear when they hear it.
Yeah.
Like you hear it and it's like, that's eerie.
Yeah, exactly.
You just described why it's eerie. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really cool.
That's the cool thing about it is, ultimately, like, what I'm talking about are intervals, just sort of distances between notes, but all of those things have a character to them, and you know them. And once
you already know them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Which I think is really neat to learn about and learn how they psychologically affect you to hear them. I really like, too, in this movie, I feel like this movie has the strongest dreamlike feel to the dream sequences, especially with the way that things will just suddenly jump from location to location. And the characters in the dream don't even seem to be like, what the hell? I was just in my bedroom. Now I'm in a boiler room. Like, it seems to make sense to them that, oh, this makes sense. Now I'm here. Because that's how it is in your dreams. You walk out your front door and you're in a grocery store. And you're like, yep, that's about right. And I feel like in the other dreams, maybe they tried to make... I feel like in the sequels, in the other dreams, they tried to make every dream a more concrete location, like in a dojo or whatever.
Yeah. Inside a comic book or whatever.
And it's like, okay, we don't typically really have dreams like that. It's really more about places that you've seen, places that you've been to, and suddenly shifting locations between them and stuff like this. I think this movie has the most dreamlike feel of the entire series.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, and that's something I noticed that drops off almost immediately with the second one has some dreamlike quality to it, but with Dream Warriors, that almost sort of is gone at that point.
Absolutely so. And as far as dislikes about the movie, I see exactly what you mean about some of the acting being pretty weak. Especially Rod. Rod's probably the worst one in the movie, I think. But I almost feel like at this point that sort of 80s slasher acting style is almost a style of acting within itself. It's for sure. I guess what I would be saying is it would be kind of like us being like, yeah, man, fucking Super Mario Brothers for NES. The graphics fucking suck. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like it's a style. Yeah. It's been so long. That style of like game design has been around so long that it is now a style in itself. Yeah, that people copy and do this, bit art kind of stuff. So I almost feel like this movie is the perfect 80s slasher acting. Is it good? No, but that's part of the style now. Yeah, it's I see what you're saying, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we see that in I don't know, say something like Zombievers. I don't know if you've seen Zombievers. Yeah. Zombievers is awesome. Absolutely love it. But yeah, like even there you can see like the way that the actors are acting is this. It's like it's been ingrained in us, this stilted way of delivering lines and this sort of maybe not the best acting like posture and stuff, but it's the way we're used to seeing it. Yeah, it's the way we're used to seeing it. It's like it's like people who enjoy opera or whatever, they understand the way that the characters exist within the opera is this long tradition of opera. Like this is part of a long tradition of slasher and American horror films. Yeah, so I'm totally okay with the acting being bad. Now, there are some pretty regrettable bits of dialogue and some really fucking funny lines in there that I forgot about. Like, okay, whenever she brings the hat out of the dream, it has like F. Krueger written inside of the hat. Yeah. As though at one point this maniacal child killing, Freddy Krueger was like, I don't want to get my hat mixed up with nobody else's. I'm gonna grab yon Sharpie and write my name in. One time he sat it down and he picked up someone else's hat and he went to kill a kid and it just didn't feel right. And just he was like, right. What the hell? And he looked at his hat and he was like, this isn't mine. I should have wrote my name in the damn thing. And I like that too when like afterwards her and her mom are having the argument and she's like, I found the hat. I pulled the hat out of the dream or whatever. And Nancy says, did you even tell Dad to have the hat inspected? Yeah, that's a great line. They're gonna get the head hat inspector in on that, man. Yeah. We brought in the hat inspector from 2 towns over. He's the best one. Yeah. So there's some pretty bad bad lines of dialogue and stuff in there, but again, I don't even care. I love watching this movie. I'm totally fine with it. Yeah, ending is questionable. That was definitely a compromise. Yeah. Ending could have been better, but to me this movie it's a 9.5 out of 10, man. I've watched it a million times. Always have fun. What's your rating? 9.5. I would want to say it's a 10 because it's so great among horror movies. Like it really fits. But then I think about the movies I think of as a 10, and they don't have those issues. And these issues are minor. That's why it's still a 9.5. But I can't say it's a full 10. I definitely want to cover all of them because I do enjoy all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Even the worst one is still a fun watch. Oh, yeah, definitely so. Well, in the meantime, our next episode that we're going to be doing for you guys is going to be about possibly my favorite movie from this favorite horror movie from this side of the millennium. If not best, probably in my top 3 up there with like The House of the Devil and stuff like that. We're going to be talking about The Witch, which I fucking love this movie. It's so good. Yeah, and it's so good, and it's so hard to not
discuss The Witch like second by second, frame by frame, because it's such a beautiful movie and so much happens that you just like there's so much like context to it, so much history, and like it's gonna be so fun to talk about. So
it's a really cool flick, man. I fucking love that. So be sure to stay tuned and tune in for that one next week. And in the meantime, I hope that you guys will do us a tremendous favor and go on iTunes and rate and review our podcast. It makes us show up in the feeds and searches a whole lot better if we have some positive ratings with our podcast. Thanks so much to everybody who's done that so far. So be sure to go in there on iTunes. Just takes a second to do. Rate and review our podcast. Use G-rated language. If you use any potty mouthing on there, they won't post your review and we won't get a rating. So go on there and write us a good, clean review. Well, where can they follow us on them social medias, Steve?
You can always follow us at Dead Lovely Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email us deadandlovelypod@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook group. So
be sure to drop us some suggestions for whatever movies that you love that you'd like to hear us gab on and on about. You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ben Eller Guitars, or find my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ben Eller Guitars, all one word. Where can they find you, Steven?
At Steven Spratling on Twitter and Instagram. That's Steven with a V, the only way to spell it. And you can also find me at your mom's house on Friday night. That's right. I'm talking to you, Billy Tompkins. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. You guys have been wonderful, and we have been dead and lovely. Goodbye.
Goodbye.